Good afternoon. I'm Margaret. I'm the president and CEO of the Executives Club of Chicago. It's my pleasure to welcome you to our third annual Talent Outlook. It's the flagship event of the HRMAC Institute at Exec Club. We have an outstanding panel of experts here with us to share their insights into the future of talent and what's ahead. If you've attended our past Talent Outlook events, thank you. Thank you for returning. And if it's your first one, we're pleased that you can join us for this exceptional program. So before we begin, I always like to thank all of the organizations and the individuals who support our mission to help the Chicago business community connect, learn, and grow. So first, I'd like to welcome and thank the members of our board of directors and our board of advisors who are here today. I'm not going to ask you to stand because these seats are a little tricky, but I do just want to acknowledge those who are in the room. We have Christy Harris, Senior Vice President and CHRO of CCC Intelligent Solutions, Beth Hayden, Chief People Officer Spot Hero, Lynn Jeckles, Midwest Region Leader Aon, Dan Cutleroff, Partner and Chicago Office Leader Mercer, Kristen Prince, Founder and Managing Partner of the Prince Law Firm, Imran Qureshi, Head North America WTW, Julie Scott, President and CEO CTS Impact, and Robert Seven, President of Chicago Region Savills. Did I miss anybody? Yes, Nora Lark, CHRO of Wintrust. She's here, and I know I missed her. Anyone else? Mary Cook, yes, of Korn Ferry. Anyone else I missed? Okay, thank you all so much for your support. I love the little Mary Cook, little voice coming out. I want to thank our presenting sponsor, WTW. Thank you so much. Also our featured sponsor, the Prince Law Firm, and all of our season sponsors who make the exceptional programming like our Talent Outlook possible. If you don't know what the HRMAC Institute is, it brings together a diverse community of leaders to tackle conversations that impact talent and organizational management. If you're a former member of HRMAC and you're interested in learning more about what's going on here, please talk to any team member. We all have badges. And if you're already a member, thank you for being here tonight. Our members really are the heart of our organization. So one more housekeeping item, we encourage you to participate in the discussion. We have text your questions. It's in your program how you do it. You just text EXEC, E-X-E-C, to 22333. You'll get a prompt, and then you can enter your question. I know that Imran will try to get to as many as possible. He's got it up there. And if you want more information about our speakers as well as upcoming programming, you can all see that in your program. Just scan the QR code, and you can see all the great things we have coming up. So now I'm going to bring up Bridget Baumstark, who's the Managing Director for WTW, and she is going to introduce our speakers.
Margaret, thanks so much for the introduction and for your tireless work on behalf of the Executive Club and our city. I'm Bridget Baumstark, Managing Director at WTW. Welcome to our third annual Talent Outlook. WTW is a business management consulting firm focused on finding solutions for people, risk, and capital. I'm joined by my colleagues here today, and we are delighted to sponsor this event. The human resources landscape has been rapidly growing and adapting over the past few years, and today we will explore the future of talent, as well as how our speakers' companies have stayed ahead of the curve when it comes to engaging, retaining, developing, and attracting talent. Joining us today for this discussion are Hilda Harris-Peel, Senior Managing Director and Chief Human Resources Officer of CME Group, Katie Lawler, Senior Vice President and CHRO at ITW, and Aaron Sojourner, Senior Researcher and Labor Economist, Upjohn Institute for Employment Research. This conversation will be moderated by Imran Qureshi, Head of North America at WTW. Thank you, everyone.
All right, well, thank you, Bridget and Margaret. Thrilled to be moderating this session for the third year. And as the introductory comments have mentioned, there's a critical role that people play in achieving business strategy. And this forum really represents the intersection of business and people. And what we've done in the past have explored the needs today of organizations, but really looking forward to say, what are those potential areas that we need to plan for in the future? And one of the aspects that we like to do, and we've done this now, this is our third year, is revisit some of the conversations we had last year. And there were certain predictions made, and I'm going to pick on three specific areas. So in last year's Talent Outlook, we were still talking about the return to office and remote, hybrid, and striking the right balance. We've seen organizations such as Amazon, Disney, Starbucks, X come out with very public statements around their positions. But generally speaking, we feel as though the noise has died down. And we don't intend on unpacking this issue any further in this conversation. And I think we probably could appreciate that. So the second area that we had a robust conversation last year was around the role of technology, automation, AI, generative AI. And there was a prediction that the enthusiasm and adoption of AI could actually cool because we've got significant costs attached to them and we've got legislation that is unknown as to the impact of AI. Clearly, that hasn't come to fruition yet because what we are seeing is still a lot of interest. If you look at the number of job postings through the course of this year, there's been a tenfold increase in generative AI job postings. If you look at what business executives are saying, 41% of them are saying that they are looking to re-engineer business processes over the next 5 years to make AI the core of those business processes. So clearly, there is still a lot of interest, and we're going to be unpacking that issue in this conversation later. And then talent. We touched on some talent strategies and innovations last year, and one example of which was taking critical talent offline from their day jobs and actually having them focus on some key areas of need in an organization, and that also serves the purpose of upskilling and developing that talent. So we'll hear other innovations, I'm sure, in this conversation as well. So we're in for a very rich discussion because a lot of the critical issues that we experienced last year are still here today. So I'm just going to lay out three critical areas very quickly, and then we're going to launch into the questions. The first is there's been a magnitude and scale of disruption. And you think about the kind of disruption, whether it be social disruption, climate change, the economy, geopolitical risk. 49% of the world's population is undertaking some kind of election in the world today from 64 countries. That's a significant amount of potential disruption. We haven't had our election yet, but there are other countries that have. We also have seen significant transformation. And transformation, I talked about AI, but there's other forms of transformation. One particularly important that you'll see, we have seen an uptick, is mergers and acquisitions. If you look at the number of mega deals, so those deals over $1 billion in size, we've seen a 31% increase. And next year, guess what? There's going to be a significant increase in M&A given interest rates are dropping. That's going to cause disruption. And then the final area is shifting labor trends. There's a continued exodus of retirees from the workforce, and those boomers are retiring, and that silver tsunami, as they're referred to, and there's another term coming as well. So if you look at that generation leaving, then you look at Generation X, a relatively small generation, and you look at the actual labor that is needed to replace these workers that are exiting, we're going to face a talent shortage likely over the next 10 years. And that Generation Alpha, that was my other term, those born between 2010 and 2024, we'll have to wait about 10 years for them to enter the workforce to be able to replace the workers that are leaving. So those are significant issues, and we actually talked about some of these in the prep. So given the disruptions, the transformations, and the shifting labor trends, we're going to get into the conversation. And I'm going to invite Aaron first, as a labor economist, to comment on what I've just said, but also give your perspectives as well.
Thanks so much, and thanks for having me here. The economy has been changing quickly over the last few years. You know, the big message is that it was boiling hot, the labor market. It's been cooling a bit, but it's still quite strong. You know, employers are hanging on to the people they've got. Layoff rates are at record lows for the last 3 years. But also hiring rates have been falling ever since the Fed hiked a couple years ago, and we're back at like hiring rates like it's 2014. So like there's not much hiring. So there's cool demand. Employers are, I think, kind of frozen in place a bit, and I think a lot of it is political risk, policy risk. I think a lot of people are waiting. We're waiting for the Fed to make a move, trying to understand what's coming there, and also waiting for the election to resolve and see which way policy's heading on that front. I think the Fed's made some strong moves recently in terms of the 50 basis point cut and telegraphing future cuts. That means more consumer demand ahead. That means more available, cheaper capital for businesses. So that's good news. That's profits ahead. That's demands ahead. As long as the big risks that you talked about don't disrupt too much. But like those are big, serious risks. Climate change, driving migration, disrupting consumer patterns that all of our businesses are premised on labor supply, on production patterns. We're seeing like Asheville, North Carolina, like wiped off the map by heavy rains. Like there's a lot more deep uncertainty about how things are going to work in the future. Not to mention the technical stuff. So in terms of the baby boomers, that is a super real and inevitable force that is shrinking the share of the population who are working age. This is something that's quite predictable from decades ago and something that's quite inevitable. For the next few decades, the share of Americans who are working age is just going to keep shrinking. And so relative to what's been, labor is going to be more scarce, capital is going to be more abundant, business models that are premised on, we can go out and buy talent are going to be harder to execute. Strategies that are premised more on we've got to make the people, we've got to build relationships and manage those over the long term are going to be more necessary. We were talking in the prep about like the term labor shortage. I really don't like that term for what this is because as an economist, like shortages are temporary things where you just have to make it through and it'll come back to normal. This is not something that's just temporary and going away. This is like a structural shift. So strategies that made sense before, like make less sense now. You just need, it's like the world has changed and management and organizations need to change. I'll stop there.
That's a really good launching point because I think there's, like with any structural shift, there are opportunities and there are risks. So I'm going to first turn to Hilda and ask you this question. So we just talked about the changes in today's workforce caused by changing demographics, the need for companies to adapt not only to the dynamics of today, but be prepared for future. Can you share how these factors are impacting talent at your organization and your strategies to respond to them? And maybe share a little bit about CME as well and yourself.
Yes, of course. Thank you so much. Yes, I'm Hilda Harris Peel, and I am the Senior Managing Director and Chief HR Officer for CME Group. You may know us better by some of our, we own and operate the Chicago Mercantile Exchange and the Chicago Board of Trade. And I've been with CME for 24 years, so it's been quite a journey, and the last 17 as the head of HR. So a lot of the things that Aaron just mentioned really resonate with me. Our talent strategy is really driven by several of these external and also some internal conditions. As at many companies, we have seen our voluntary turnover plunge to levels unseen, and less than 4% in some areas. So that's truly a big shift for us. In the midst of this very low voluntary turnover, we are undergoing two major transformations. We are migrating all of our applications to the cloud as part of a partnership with Google, and we are also adopting the product operating model. And so this is a really big shift for our workforce in terms of the way that work gets done, from more of a functional model to more of a customer-centric, product-centric model. So to enable, those very key business priorities in a low voluntary turnover type of environment, we really had to shift our focus from one that was primarily buying talent to one that, yes, we'll continue to buy talent, but we also are now very focused on building talent. And so on the build side of the equation, we've refocused our efforts on internal mobility and upskilling our workforce. I'll tell you that in the last 12 months, 29% of our employees have taken on new roles through the internal recruitment process. On the buy side, we've also diversified our workforce outside the U.S. to tap into additional talent pools and to be able to tap into some of those very, high-skilled pools of talent that exist outside the U.S. So I'll turn it to Katie.
Katie, yep.
So I am with ITW, also known as Illinois Toolworks. I've been Chief HR Officer for 10 years. If you're not familiar with the company, we are very diversified industrial manufacturer. We operate in 46 different countries with a whole suite of different product offerings. So when we think about talent, it always really starts at the core. We use a proprietary operating model. It's very creatively called the ITW business model. But it's got three pieces to it. One is just how we run our businesses in terms of a process orientation, from setting the strategy and objectives all the way through to how we develop our products, manufacture, and serve our customers. And it's based on the principles around 80-20, if you're familiar with the Pareto principle. So it's very focused, it's very disciplined. I like to say that, the second piece is what we call our entrepreneurial culture, which is very, very well defined in our organization, and we really have a lot of conviction that that drives incredible results and execution in our company. And the third part of the business model is how we innovate, how we design products to solve our customer, as we say, pain points. That collective business model is just a business model, right? It takes people to actually take that business model, learn it, develop skill and capability, and ultimately expertise in its application. So we have to be a very, very talent-centric organization. We're not driven by particular products per se. It's the business model and its application in various product categories or market categories that drives our success. So I can't go hire business model experts, right? I have to hire people that we believe will be aligned to our culture, will appreciate this entrepreneurialism that we have, that will embrace the business model and our 80-20 thinking to drive these great business outcomes. So for the last 10 years, we've been on this journey, and I think this build versus buy is so very true, because we have to go out and find great talent, and then we have to develop them into business model experts. I did in our prep talk about labor shortage, because it sure feels like a shortage. There's just not enough talent out there, and so we really have to become very focused in terms of being strong at developing talent, progressing people's careers within our organization. And I say that not only from a leadership level, but all the way down to our colleagues who are on the front line operating our equipment. We can talk a little bit about talent and the advancement in technology as it relates to our hourly colleagues. So lots of shifts that are happening, and I do think this is the new normal. It's not going to change, and so we do have to adapt and become even really excel in terms of our capability to not only attract the talent, develop the talent, and retain the talent for the long term. And the last thing I note is just the other consideration for us and why it puts an urgency behind it is we have fairly aggressive growth plans. So there's a whole capacity consideration here, not only from a manufacturing footprint, but do we have the people, do we have the skills and capabilities to fulfill the capacity that our growth plans are hopefully going to provide. So that's another dynamic.
So this, just picking up on a couple of threads there, it's build versus buy, or build and buy, because I don't think it's necessarily one or the other. The build, just a reflection here, that requires you not only to develop talent, but the expectation that they'll stay with you over a period of time. So that ups the ante on retention. So we'd love to just sort of hear a perspective around how do you do that over the long term? Were you just essentially modeling out there's going to be turnover? And I think on the buy side, then, Hilda, you said it as well, that you're widening the net of the talent, and that exists not just within this country, but outside of this country. And then within this country, I assume DEI plays as important a role as it has done previously, even more so because the stakes are even higher. Maybe if you could just comment and pick up on a couple of those points, maybe the development point.
Sure. I think development, well, we've done a lot of work around what we call our employee experience, which is also known as the employee value proposition, but we've kind of banished that term because executives always rolled their eyes when they heard it. So our employee experience work started really after COVID, and we went out and we identified the core talent segments, again, from our frontline employees all the way up to senior leaders, and we asked the two simple questions. What brought you to ITW? What keeps you here? And we did this across our broad footprint of places of operation. And what was amazing to me and really encouraging is that there was some strong consistency and themes in terms of what keeps people here. And obviously that's critically important to them. And it does go to our business model, it goes to our culture, and most importantly, it goes to the point around people feeling challenged and that they can find their next opportunity at our company. And so how do we continue to build off of that and facilitate it? And I think Hilda touched on it. Internal mobility is a key one, not only in terms of the employees being able to direct their own career path, but what can we do from, call it an HR infrastructure, to help facilitate that?
Hilda, what about any perspectives you have?
Yeah, I think retention, not right now, of course, because the attrition levels have been so low. But you know, it has always been, learning and development has always been a real focus area for us, especially now that we're undergoing these transformations within our business. You know, the focus is really on how do we make sure that we are providing those learning and development opportunities for people. And so we have formal programs that are available for our more senior employees. There are nomination-based programs that are very customized and really focus on leadership skills around agility and how to manage through change. And then, you know, we also have more broad-based programs, particularly around people managers. We know the important role that people managers play in employee engagement and performance, and so we do have a track of learning available to people managers so that they can focus on enhancing their skills. And then, of course, you know, the rank and file employees, we want to make sure that they have access to be able to develop their skills. And one thing that's worked well for us has been we have mentoring and coaching circles where senior leaders host a cohort of 5 to 6 employees, and they talk about all sorts of leadership development and career topics that are important to all employees. So the learning and development focus has been key. You had asked about D&I, right? So, you know, for us, we have always taken the approach that inclusion is going to be our strategy when it comes to diversifying our workforce. And so tapping into broader pools of talent, like I mentioned earlier, whether it's in the U.S. or outside the U.S., has really been very key for us. I will say that we have had a focus as our business has become more diversified and our markets have grown outside the United States, our employee populations have grown outside the United States as well. So back in 2017, 25% of our employees were non-US based. Today, that number is 40%. And so from a recruiting perspective, we want to attract as many diverse applicants as we possibly can. We partner with various nonprofits to do that, to get access to pools of talent we wouldn't otherwise have access to. We do a lot of community outreach with organizations and universities, from Girls Who Code to various student groups on campuses. And then internally, we're trying to, what can we do once we've diversified the applicant pool and we've brought these very qualified candidates into the recruiting process? How can we make sure that they're having a very rich, very high quality experience? And so we recently rolled out an interview scorecard. Provides an apples-to-apples basis, consistent way of evaluating talent. And then we continue to work very closely with our 11 employee resource groups. And so that's been a very good source both of talent for us, but then it also provides that retention. So as we are attracting people into the organization, they can find communities of shared interests within the exchange.
Great. I want to pick up on a couple of things and bring Aaron into the conversation. So when we talk about retention, coming back to that topic and the role of the employer, how many of you remember a few years ago the term Uberization of work and talent platforms? And that was going to revolutionize the way that we worked. Individuals would essentially not work for an employer, but farm out their skills. And that was going to be the primary means in which work was going to be taking place. Hasn't panned out that way. And what we've seen is that the role of the employer, I think, is critical. And be interested in Aaron's view on this, because if you look at the Edelman Trust Barometer, employers are trusted more so than media, NGOs, and other institutions. I'm forgetting the fourth one. Government. Thank you, Margaret. And so I guess, Aaron, what's your view of the role of the employer in really being central to the employment of people?
Yeah, they're critical, and I think increasingly so. I think employers being able to differentiate themselves from their competition is going to be a key driver of success. So not just being another employer on an app among hundreds of employers, but being an employer of choice, or, being different and desirable in some way. Like, I love this process you described of asking what brought you here, what keeps you here, because that hones in on what really the employees value and what's your special comparative advantage relative to the competition. And doubling down on that, investing in that, that is a competitive moat that you build in the labor market that allows you to invest in your people, build their productivity, and be able to rely on benefiting from that productivity in the future and not just having them take it on the road somewhere else. So I think that, so when we were talking about the baby boomers retiring, that was a statement about US domestic labor, right? And it is very important to know that, to put that in the context of there are increased opportunities for offshoring, global exchange. And I think a huge issue is immigration in the US. So the only way basically that we're going to get more talent and workforce in the US in the next couple of decades is immigration. There's no other option. We can offshore work, that's a different way to access talent. But if you want to do it here, there's just no substitute.
So let's talk about work, because I want to get into the AI discussion. So, I just had a meeting actually yesterday with a client that AI is a core part of the transformation of their business. And would love to hear from you, Katie, Hilda, particularly, and then Aaron, if you could provide some perspectives that are broader. How are you broaching the focus on upskilling and training, given the central opportunity of AI in your organization?
Well, I'm going to split that into two parts.
Yep.
AI is...
Yep.
And I just say in our organization, it's still in its early stages. From a technology side, we always talk about being a fast follower. I get a little nervous about what that means in the context of AI, because that's super fast. But if you really think about, we are using AI in two areas that I'm going to say exploring. We call them test cases. One is on our product side, and product design development, and the use of AI in the products we make for our customers. That's the big business opportunity from a growth perspective and a competitive perspective. The second would be, I would call it operational efficiencies, right? Back office, HR, there are plenty to explore. I would say, though, that AI, quite candidly, we are a large, complex global organization. We're a public company. AI is going to take a tremendous amount of investment and capital. And it sounds great, but when you start thinking about, has anyone priced out a Copilot license for 46,000 employees? I actually think the best, and I was commenting earlier about this in a quick conversation before getting started, I actually think the best opportunities for AI are going to be in smaller, nimble organizations, most likely private, that aren't going to have to make the big capital investment. Because part of the problem is to make the business case to make a multi-million-dollar, potentially billion-dollar investment scale, that's hard to do when you're a large public company and you don't see an immediate return to that investment. And so I think, this isn't a prediction.
You read my mind, Katie.
It's my prediction,
it's so
but
funny.
I actually think AI, I don't want to say skeptical because that's not a fair term, but I'm really questioning the pace of adoption at a large scale when we look at large organizations. There's a peer company, I won't name it, large global industrial manufacturer. The new CEO is pushing this big time. How they scale it and how they drive really great business outcomes, right? Growth or savings will be interesting to follow. So that's kind of where I put AI. But for our business, what's right in front of us and has been on a really accelerated pace is I would put it in the category of automation. Simplifying work, making better products faster for our customers. And that's probably had the largest impact on our frontline colleagues, right, where their jobs are changing. And I do think there's a misperception that automation means job loss. People go right to it. Automation means better jobs, because the jobs we're getting rid of, no one wants to do. And I can't hire for them, and the turnover is really high. Think about working in a Amazon distribution center. That's the kind of work we want to get away from for a lot of different reasons. And so automation that we've really moved very aggressively on over the last 5-7 years has been, yes, it's eliminating jobs, but it's upskilling all the rest of them. And so we're really focused on high robotics, right? The skill that's needed to maintain that equipment is, it's pretty extensive and complicated. And again, I go back to the comment Hilda made about build it, because we can't go out and buy it. And so a lot of our talent initiatives are really around how do we structure our hourly workforce in a way that creates these career paths with training and advanced skill development, career progression, to not only develop the skill and capability, but obviously to retain it over
Good.
the longer term.
Just to follow up on one point, and by the way, I won't hold you to the prediction, but and it links to a question that actually just came through. I know so many recent grads who cannot get jobs, and where are the shortages? Where should universities and parents be focusing? I want to maybe pivot a little bit on that question, but link it back to AI. I've heard this from organizations where, given AI is going to streamline some of that entry-level work, how do you train and develop individuals into an organization to learn the fundamentals, or do they have to? Will they always have a co-pilot next to them that is going to be with them all along, and that's collectively who they bring to the organization? What's your view around entry-level individuals and how you train and develop?
Well, I have 2 entry-level aged children in my family, so I'm going to confess I'm slightly biased. I also put a plug, they were both liberal arts educated, which I think is a huge advantage going forward. But in our company, quite honestly, we haven't done a lot of entry-level hiring historically. A lot of that was how we were previously organized under a prior strategy. And a lot of our focus now for entry, and I have some of my early in career colleagues here who are really focused on our intern program and early career development. We hire a lot of engineers and employ a lot of engineers in our company. That's actually, when you look at graduate pools, there's a scarcity, especially when we talk about diverse engineering talent. So we have plenty of space for entry-level engineers. So if anyone has kids going to engineering school, send them our way. But I do think that holds true in other roles. Marketing and research, right, would be one. Some of the entry-level HR roles that we rely on administration and processing and support for that. So there's definitely going to be an evolution around that, and I think it's incumbent upon our education system to prepare kids for a much broader skill set. Then I think we've become very specialized in education, and I think that's going to come back to bite us over the long term.
Hilda, what about AI at CME?
Well, I like the word that Katie just used, evolution, because that's how we're looking at AI right now versus revolution. Perhaps if I was sitting up here a year ago, I may have thought differently about it, but I think what we've learned over the last 12 to 18 months is that there's a lot of promise with generative AI, but there's a lot we still don't know about it. And so we're taking a little bit more of a cautious approach. We want to make sure that we truly understand the capabilities. We want to make sure we understand things like bias that may get integrated into AI systems. We want to make sure we have a really high quality output. And I will say that the testing that we've done so far has given us a little bit of pause in terms of the pace. So yes, the change will, it will continue to happen, and the technology will continue to evolve and improve. But for right now, I would say, we're not racing towards it, and we are partnering with vendors who we think will probably do a better job than we will in-house developing our own AI tools. So we're watching the space really carefully.
So I have 2 quick anecdotes, and then Aaron, I want to bring you in. Was with a client just last week in the hospitality industry, and they're leaning in big time into AI. But the way they view it is saying high tech, but high human touch. High tech, high human touch. So they view the ability to, I think, create better work, was what you were saying, Katie, and then really accentuate the guest experience. So that was one organization. The other organization I spoke to as well just last week was a healthcare company. And I was talking to them about acquisitions, and they said the only acquisitions they're going to be doing is AI related. Smaller AI capabilities that they don't have, they're going to acquire that. It was really interesting in both those cases how they're thinking about AI. But Aaron, I mean, I think you have some perspectives around AI versus generative AI and other aspects?
Yeah, I'll just say, I think the evidence on generative AI, so far, it's still early days, obviously, but there has been quite a lot of research and systematic experimentation. And it's pointing, I think the scope for it now is quite limited. Like, it helps with language-based work if you're generating language, if you're generating code, if you're generating press releases or slide decks and reports, and it can speed up that work. It can boost productivity in those domains, and it seems to help the people who are less expert the most. So it can be an aid to bring people up to average quality. It can't really help people who are already very competent, but it can be a tutor and an aid for people who are less expert. And also, like, people who are working with translations. So it's really good at translating language and helping people, maybe if you're engaging across cultures and you need help to polish up your emails and your reports, like, it can be super helpful for that kind of stuff. So in terms of global integration, I think it opens up opportunities. But that's like one small part of AI is generative AI. And I think it's, more thinking about it as automation is the right way. Like, and automation in the physical space, automation in computational automation. So, and really, the machines are very good at predicting and like detecting patterns in data. And so anytime you need to do prediction, anytime you need to predict demand, predict traffic, predict disruption, predict, things, and you have data, like, there's probably a better way to do it now than there was 2 years ago or 3 years ago. And so that's the way, I think, a good way to think about the power of these new technologies of AI and machine learning and all that.
Okay, we're going to come on to predictions at the end, so I'd love to hear your perspectives around that. I want to pivot to talking about leadership development. We've talked a lot about the disruptions, we've talked about AI. Leaders are having to contend with a lot. And by the way, their bosses are probably retiring and they're having to learn quickly. So how are you developing leaders? Maybe start with Katie.
Well, I'd start with how we've defined the expectation for leaders, right? That would then guide us in terms of what needs to be developed. And I kind of go back to the earlier reference I made about our business model. And our leaders need to be experts in the business model, and they need to lead through our cultures. So early on in our enterprise strategy, about 10 years ago, we developed what we call another creative name, Great ITW Leader Framework. And it is our set of attributes that are very specific and unique to ITW and our business model. And being really clear in terms of those expectations for our leaders, right? So we use that framework really to guide all of our leadership decisions. Selection from the hiring or placement side, certainly development, and really the progression of that talent through to higher levels in our company. And so it's been a key source for us. But it hasn't been static, too. So we've made two major, call it edits, changes to our leadership framework over the last 10 years to drive pretty significant shifts. One was interestingly around inclusion and leading diverse teams, which we made that change in 2020, where we did this kind of self-examination. Are our expectations clear enough for our leaders around leading diverse and inclusive teams? And we said it wasn't clear enough, so we made a major change there. And then the last one is just more recently, it was done for purposes of this year for our leaders, and it's really about innovation, because we have pretty aggressive plans to drive more growth through innovation. And so we, again, kind of challenged ourselves, are the expectations clear enough? And so now what we'll do is, now that we've updated those expectations, we are in the midst of then really, shall we say, training up our leaders on our innovation framework and refined process so that they can really lead their organizations, hopefully more effectively, to deliver more growth through innovation. So our training model, I honestly don't like the word training, and I don't like development necessarily, because I think about it holistically. We like to say we follow the 70-20-10 model. So 70% of our training is on the job, and I don't mean that as a cop-out. We don't do formal training. We will do formal training, but we find that the best learning opportunities put someone right into it, right? Put them into the mix, whether that's a special project, whether it's one of our operating model, we call it our front-to-back process, whether it's a process improvement, simplification exercise. So we are very focused on giving our talent the opportunity to experience something new, learn something new, and hopefully be better at the end of that. So that's kind of our training and development piece. So that's the approach that we take with leadership development. We do have some formal programs that we put key talent segments through, and it's very, no surprise, very leadership model, business model centric.
Hilda, what about yourself?
I think the only thing I would add, because what Katie just described is very similar at CME. It is true that the thing we often hear from both leaders and employees is that it's really hard to carve out time to do the formal programs. And so that's something we certainly need to get better at, because I think when the workload, between the workload and the deadlines, it is very important to make time for that, but we shouldn't also discount that on-the-job experience, because we've often found that the people who excel, are often not because they spent, X number of hours in a classroom, but because they actually got into the project, were doing the work, with really experienced expert people who could show them the way. And so I think it has to be both.
Aaron?
I'll just say, I think, one of the best ways to support development is to schedule redundancy in staff, right? So it's really a scheduling problem on some level, right? Which is to say, we're gonna make sure we have too much staff for a little while in this way that creates some space so that everyone's not actually just doing the job at fast pace, but there's some slack that the team has to teach each other, learn together, and so you need more structure on it, but it does create scheduling problems, but also you get benefits in the longer run.
So there's a question that came through, and I want to invite just the panelists to maybe comment on a bright spot related to talent, because the question was, there's a lot of conversation about concerns and challenges for talent. Could you talk about a bright spot? What are you seeing that's actually...
I see bright spots. That's most of my day.
Awesome. Share some.
Do tell.
Well, I think a lot of our role as HR leaders are problem solvers, right? We're trying to guide and support our businesses to success. And sometimes that's solving problems. Sometimes that's enabling, right? And what I love about my job is I can see people be successful, right? Through whether we solve problems, remove roadblocks, or help enable and facilitate. And I will tell you, I get really excited when I run into people in my travels around ITW and they've moved into a new opportunity. And they're super excited and they want to share it with you. Those are my bright spots.
That's good.
And my goal is to try to maximize those bright spots to the extent possible.
Hilda?
I would say, I don't think there's ever been a better time to be in HR. I think there is this appreciation, or recognition at the very least, that has grown over the years for the important role that HR plays in the business and in the strategy. And so I see that recognition in our business leaders. And if anything, the pandemic obviously was horrible. But if I have to find a silver lining, I would say it was never, ever more apparent the important role that people play in the success of our organization than during that period, and it really brought it to the fore. And I think we've just continued to see this growing appreciation for the role that HR can play when it comes to bringing in the best talent, engaging talent, the development that is happening, and now the retention, which is a nice byproduct as well. But all of it is working together to drive business outcomes, and our leaders are seeing that.
What's your bright spot, Aaron?
Oh, I think really this economy right now is really strong in a way that we haven't seen. So the future looks bright. Like this is, we're investing a lot we've just committed to invest in infrastructure, like reducing transportation costs, like clean energy transformation. Like there's a lot of positive trends ahead. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity ahead. One other silver lining out of the pandemic that I'll mention is it forced every organization to reinvent the ways that work happens to like maximally allow locational flexibility and remote work. And that is going to pay dividends for organizations for a long time. Like it changed the equilibrium for a lot of organizations. And one group that's really benefited from that is people with disabilities. Like the employment rate for people with disabilities has gone up quite a lot since the pandemic, like 30%, not percentage points, but 30%. And I think a lot of that is so in terms of like the economy is strong, the employment rates are really high domestically, and new pools of talent are coming online in ways that haven't been possible before. There have been so many like new matches formed over the last few years. I think we're seeing part of the stability we're seeing now is the fact that we like had this massive reshuffling. And now people are like in a good match, and we see productivity, we see labor productivity through the roof. Like employers are getting more with less, making more with less.
So essentially, there's a lot of optimism here.
Yeah, I would just add too, and this is maybe a little, I think tight labor markets. I won't say short. Tight labor markets actually make us better employers.
I was going to say
And we all
same.
benefit from that,
Yeah.
right? We have to be on our game. We have to be good managers. We have to be good leaders. If we're not going to succeed in the talent game. And so I think
I agree. I was going to pick up on that same point. And I think a good way to sort of calibrate where we are is to look back 10 years ago and say, okay, how did we think about talent then? I don't think we were really talking about purpose, and purpose has now become really core around why we do what we do. I don't think we are talking about DEI in the same way that we're talking about today. And you mentioned disabilities and being able to widen that net. That's actually something positive. And you talk about workplace or work locations and being able to work anywhere conceivably for some jobs in some companies. And so you can probably think about things that are existing today that didn't exist 10 years ago that have significantly added a positive dimension to the way in which we work and interact. So we really did unpack that question, whoever asked that. So hopefully that gave you some sense of, there's a lot of good stuff going. But I want to talk about change. And we've talked a lot about transformation, getting from point A to point B. We're trying to assess what the future looks like. So inevitably, we're going to have to manage through change and have people that can help lead through change. So I'm going to start with you, Hilda. So can you cast your mind back to any successful change at your company? And what key factors did you identify as being critical to managing through that successful change?
Yes. I don't know a time when we haven't seemingly been in the midst of a huge transformational change. It feels like it's been nonstop for us at CME Group. And I will say that where we have managed that change most successfully is when our leaders have been just locked in and walking the talk. And when it comes to this current transformation that we're undergoing, we made a really intentional effort to make sure that our leaders were indeed very focused, and that they then in turn could help our employees understand the why. Because the why is critical, and it's really hard to effectuate change in an organization if people don't understand what that purpose is and why we're doing it. We've also introduced the concepts around psychological safety, and making sure that we're promoting a culture where learning can happen from mistakes, and where employees feel comfortable speaking up. And so that's another one of these concepts that I don't think we were talking about 10 years ago. No. So I think some of those newer ideas that have really come to the fore in the last few years, and those are some of the things that we're using to help manage and drive forward the change that's happening in the organization. And then investment. We've invested in 2023, just to give you some sense, $1 million in upskilling our employees and with cloud skills. So I don't also, a lot of this stuff doesn't just happen, right? There's actual investment that's occurring to help effectuate the change and make sure that we're successful. Because these are very large investments.
Katie, what about change at ITW?
Yes, well, the evolution of our company as it exists today, it's changed significantly from a dozen years ago. ITW for many years was really, I described it as a holding company, where it had a huge portfolio of different businesses and not necessarily any connectivity, and there wasn't any necessarily strategy from the center other than managing this portfolio of businesses. And so with the initiation of what we call the enterprise strategy, it was really defining a strategy from the center, defining this business model, these operating principles, and this culture that is going to guide our business leaders and our employees in terms of how to run their businesses. So it was a tremendously successful strategic pivot. And I think we learned a lot organizationally in terms of, okay, so what does it take to drive large-scale organizational change? Because most change initiatives fail. And I think those learnings have really helped us, even to this day, how we think about continuing to guide and lead our organization. I'd like to think that we are a pretty resilient company, in part because of our decentralized operating structure. It allows us to move very quickly and be very nimble to make decisions in our local markets for our customers, for our employees. But one of the core learnings from the initiation of the enterprise strategy, it's really basic. It was always explain the what and the why. And so it's incorporated into our leadership model in how we lead. Are you explaining the what and the why? And we even have processes, like our strategic planning process, where each business defines its strategic intent. It's a one-page document. It can't be more than one page. And it becomes the foundational means of communicating to your employees what are our priorities, who are, as we say, 80 customers and our 80 products, what are our key strengths, but what are our opportunities to get better, and those are prioritized and laid out. So everyone has visibility around what are we doing, why are we doing it, and I think that's been hugely valuable to us in terms of making sure everyone's focused and understanding what we all need to do. Having said that, I don't want to oversimplify. Change is hard. And when we make change, we really try to be as communicative and transparent around why we're making the change and what people need to do differently.
Great. Okay, I'm going to invite each of you now, last question, to make a prediction for 2025, and we will revisit it, so come back next year. I won't attribute names next year, people won't remember, but I'll attribute the actual prediction. So I'm going to start with Aaron.
I feel like the generative AI bubble prediction from last year is still good, and like just haven't had enough time.
Wow.
So I'm happy to double down on that. But I wasn't here last year. I didn't know about it. But I mean, there's promise, but it's overhyped, I think.
Interesting. Okay. Katie?
I thought we'd get more certainty from the labor economists in the future.
That was pretty good. That was a pretty sharp prediction.
Okay. Mine maybe is a bit of a cop-out. I'm just expecting more change. This is it. It's not going to settle down. I think there's still so much uncertainty. I appreciate your more bullish view on the economy. I hope that plays out. But I think we just have to embrace the change and get our organizations to a point where, you know, it's commonplace. It's the continuation of the VUCA world. Here it is. It's the current state. So I would say next year we're still going to see a lot of change.
I think you're going to be right. So, Hilda,
Okay.
last word.
Well, I think we've seen the job market pendulum swing pretty widely over the last 18 months. So, you know, I think this time next year, well, I think we're overdue for a bit of a correction, and so I think we're going to wind up seeing a swing back to a little more candidate-driven type of marketplace. So I could be wrong, but
Okay.
I don't feel like these good times can last.
Okay, all right. Candidate-driven, generative AI bubble, and lots of change. Thank you so much.
What a fantastic panel. Thank you. Good afternoon. I'm Kristen Prinz. I'm founder and managing partner of the Prinz Law Firm. It's a boutique employment law firm that serves businesses, executives, and professionals. Over the past 15 years, we've seen the ups and downs in the labor market. I'm actually glad to hear that Aaron is saying this is not a labor shortage, it's a structural shift. Essentially, companies have to stay ahead of the curve in recruitment, employee relations, technology, including AI, and culture, to remain competitive and appealing. I want to thank the panel on behalf of the Executives Club of Chicago and our firm, Emron, Hilda, Aaron, and Katie. You guys were fantastic. I think I speak for all of us that we will all be talking about building talent instead of buying talent, investing in upskilling, investing in maintaining the talent through the employee experience. I love the idea of the employee experience. Investing more in mentoring and coaching. And just as Hilda said that there's really no better time to be in HR, I have to say there's no better time to be in employment law. And really because I think we're being a part of making work better, just like HR. So thank you all for joining us today. Hopefully you'll join us in the reception outside the auditorium doors. Before you head out, if you haven't already done so, please scan the QR code on the tables or the registration station, and please complete the survey. Thank you, and have a great evening.